In that sense, Sandeep Shastri, while I'm trying to give a world picture of looking at this big election here, because there are many more elections as well to take place in different parts of the world, is there a trend that we can at all pick? Or should we look at each election very distinctively to the other? I mentioned incumbency at the start, incumbent governments under notice, but there are other issues of nationalism, cultural divides, that also immigration, that also are playing an important role in widening fault lines within societies. Even in India, we've had this debate between the nature of politics. Rahul Gandhi is pushing much more left of center politics. Mr. Modi pushing much harder right-wing politics. Is that still a factor you believe that's playing out there?
Rajdeep, I think there is a range of similarities which we will see in terms of electoral verdicts, though of course I must hasten to add that I am not trying to make a generalization. There are specificities with regard to every election. But if you look at the general trend, vote against the performance deficit of the regime in power is something that we are seeing around the world. And that performance deficit is in terms of the economy. The performance deficit is in terms of the service delivery which is expected of the government. That performance deficit is in terms of the way different scandals have emerged in societies. And if you look across the world, and especially if you look at Europe, the whole debate on the role of the far right, the whole debate on immigration, be it Poland, be it Denmark, be it Slovakia, be it Germany, be it France, and be it the recent EU elections, you see this common thread across elections where you see this expression of public dissatisfaction with the performance of government, be it economy, be it immigration, be it probity with regard to the performance and the work done by leaders, or the question of service delivery. I think there is this common thread of connectivity that is there. However, I would add, there are specificities in each of these countries which add on to the challenges of those in power.
In fact, those specificities, Daniel Block, in the United States is significant because, as we've been saying, this is an economy which is doing very well. And yet there is a sense, perhaps, is it the age factor, or is it simply, again, some level of a cultural divide that the Trumpians have tapped into? And so despite the fact that he's been indicted at different times, they're still standing by him. Is that is United States in a way sui generis, very distinct to what we are seeing in the rest of the world?
I mean, I think as people were saying, there are similarities and there are differences. And immigration, as people brought up, it's an enormous issue in the United States, and it's one that plays into Trump's hand. Polls routinely show that voters trust Donald Trump and the Republicans more on immigration than they trust the Democrats. In addition, there are cultural issues here that are different from immigration. There's abortion, which in theory should play into the Democrats' hands and does help them in particular cases. There's also issues around the rights of the LGBTQ community. So there's a kind of a whole stew of factors that are at play in the United States, which really cut in different directions. And yet I keep coming back to this fact that the incumbent government is just unpopular. And it was unpopular in 2020. We now have more than kind of 6 years where the incumbent government has done poorly, to the point where we may actually go from the current incumbent government back to another one. It's really hard to put your finger on any one particular force that's at work in the United States in terms of why the current government is unpopular. But it is. And I do think inflation, immigration, and different cultural issues really are at the core. But we may see if Biden steps down, whether it has a lot to do with the person of Biden himself and his age.
Which leads me to a final point, Navteej Sarna. A couple of years ago, the world thought this was the age of the strong man. You need these strong leaders who come in and say, I'm going to set the system right. almost coming in from the outside, the so-called outsider netas. Narendra Modi was also seen to be a prototype of that kind of a neta. Is that all slowly shifting? People are saying, look, we want someone who will handle all our basic issues. Show us the direction, particularly to solving our economic hardships. Seems to be a running theme across the world, if anything.
I think you're right. I mean, there is a strongman syndrome which is running across the world. Ultimately, it depends upon what the strongman is delivering and what the government is delivering. What people are looking for, essentially, for instance, is in the United Kingdom today, and I'm just drawing from that because that's happened today, is stability, is predictability. And it depends how the government is delivering that. People are looking at that daily stuff happening. Of course, there are fundamental issues. The United States, if I can go back to that for a moment, is already locked into two blocks. I mean, there are the issues that have been mentioned, whether it's inflation, abortion, immigration, etc. They have all been baked in, as the Americans say. The issue is only a few swing states. And there it matters as to how many you can pull in there onto one side or the other. And that's the American system of the way that works. So I think ultimately there are ideological battles going on. There are personality issues, and there are issues of governance. And the issues of public accountability in terms of scandals, etc. So I'm afraid that you would have to see each election in its own specificity, given a approach. We are living in an age where countries are driving away from a sort of overall cooperative situation into a more competitive situation.
Therefore, very quickly, Sandeep Shastri, what is the one thing or two things that you think Narendra Modi has done right, that he's been able to, in a way, offset 10 years of anti-incumbency? Yes, his party came down by 63 seats, but he's in government. Is that more due to the lack of trust in the opposition, or the fact that he enjoys far greater popularity than even his MPs and his party even now?
Rajdeep, today's election or the election we had a month ago proves one important point. Electoral contests are essentially perception battles. It is about the voters' perception on how a leader performs. It is about the voters' perception of what a government delivers. If the Indian Constitution became a critical factor in certain states, if the fear of amending the Constitution, if somebody had 400 plus, became a factor in certain states, if the strength of the leadership and the charisma of leadership became a critical factor in certain states, it is all about perception. And I would also believe that the UK verdict today is about a perception battle. The perception about the Conservatives not being able to deliver, a perception about the need for change. And I think in that sense, the verdict in India a month ago and the verdict here now has a lot of similarities in terms of how voters went out and exercised their franchise.